Alrighty, everyone! This is the big one. Welcome to the Roads to the Porterverse episode, centered around the one and only Northwestern Railway. This railway's history is excruciatingly long. Let's be honest. And disclaimer as always for these videos, this is not official lore in any regard at all. Some stuff may be similar, some stuff may be different. It's all intentional. It is all purely headcanon, aka made up. So if you agree or disagree with any stuff in here, it is perfectly fine. And if you want to use any elements from my headcanon videos, go ahead. And also if you want to make your own sort of videos in the style of this series or my other series, go nuts. Completely fine. Anyway, so this is part 1 of the Northwestern Railway and Railroads of the Porterverse. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. It all begins on a little island off the coast of England. As of 1921, there were 2 standing railways on the island of Sodor. The Titmus, Wellsworth, and Brendam Light Railway, and the Sodor and Mainland Railway. And they were occupying the east and west region respectively. In 1921, the Railways Act was passed, and thus the hundreds of railway systems in the United Kingdom at the time were grouped into larger ones. These were the LNER, LMS, GWR, and SR. The railways of Sodor were excluded from the Act, as the awkward placement between the certain regions was overlooked by Parliament. It basically left the current Big Four railways to determine what to happen with Sodor's railways. It was also during this time that the people of central Sodor, so around like Kilden area, were demanding rail access. This led to the 2 railways on Sodor agreeing to a merger which doubled the defense mechanism to prevent buyout. Thus, the 2 railways at the time merged, and that created the Northwestern Railway. But the fight was still on, as the LMS was growing pretty eager to buy out the then struggling Northwestern Railway. The LNER, the big competitor of the LMS, sought to prevent their competitor from expanding, but they also didn't have interest in buying either. They instead sold the struggling Northwestern Railway 2 of their brand new A1 Pacific locomotives. They will be the primary engines that will build the main line alongside Thomas and Edward. The main line will be fully completed by early 1923. With this, express services were opened, and the railway began to thrive finally. The NWR thrived so much that the Big Four conceded and let the Northwestern Railway remain independent. The NWR was now one of the Big 5 railways of Britain, and thus a new golden age began. With the grand opening of the Northwestern Railway, some other engines were shuffled around and were given new designations. A few one-off engines were also built as well. The terminus of the railway was also changed to become Knapford, as all the services started there. In mid-1923, Henry broke down a tunnel. The director of the time, Sir Fergus Wegaby, never liked Henry and had him break up in a tunnel in a fit of rage after learning about his breakdown. A new whole tunnel was bored just to bypass Henry, even though it could have been moved. And this whole incident outraged the entire working community of the railway and made headlines. The government had to step in and ultimately remove Wegaby from power. Fergus Wegaby was replaced by a young Sir Tom Mahat I, who reopened the tunnel immediately after. In 1924, the first engine of what was going to be a new NWR steam engine class entered service. The 260 mogul known as James was indeed his engine, but he had a slight design fault. His brake blocks were wooden, and thus caught fire during his trials. He actually derailed on one of these goods trials near Crosby. Thankfully, Thomas was able to clear the mess immediately, and in his reward for acting quickly, he received 2 of his own coaches for his exclusive use. James will re-enter service shortly afterwards, with the faults corrected. The incident would still discourage the railway from building more of his class, and thus James was now a one-off engine. In 1925, Thomas and Brodie raced on the Low Branch Line. This was kept under wraps for a good while, as there was a fear of being fined for various reasons, like speeding and stuff like that. In the same year, in the winter, Thomas crashed into a snow pile, which resulted in the newly built tractor known as Terrence rescuing him. Thomas and Terrence would become good friends after this. In February 1926, most of the big engines, led by Gordon, Henry, and James, all went on strike. They demanded that a shunter be designated exclusively to Knapford Station, as the engine was usually Thomas and he was no longer able to do it at all anymore. Tom had the NWR's locomotive works above an 040 saddle tank known as Percy, just for this occasion. During and after Percy's instruction, a batch of engines which included Thomas, Molly, Edward, and Percy took on the work of the big engines until they returned to service in June of 1926, and that was when the strike ended. In 1928, Edward was finally designated as the primary runner of the Brenham branch line. In 1929, the effects of the recession began to take hold. The second A1, known as Jade, who was number 27, was sold back to the LNER, while Gordon stayed. And in 1930, engines 98462 and 87546 were sold alongside engine Red Dragon in order to keep the railway afloat. The locomotive roster of the railway was very slim at this time. In 1931, wanting to avoid selling another one of his engines, Sir Tom I had large amounts of Welsh coal purchased for use for Henry, as a means of countering the design faults. This would last until around January 1935, when Henry collided with a goods train near Kildare. The railway will carry out a complete overhaul of Henry, which saw him out of action for the rest of the year. Other engines like Molly and James will pick up the goods work slack. Henry will return to service in early 1936 with a new firebox design which greatly improved its performance. In 1937, Henry was mistakenly repainted with glowing green paint, and by nightfall, half the island was convinced he was another ghost that was terrorizing the railway. He will be repainted by 1938, of course. 1938 also saw the China Clay Pits south of Brenham open, and Bill and Ben would arrive to run it. In 1939, the Ironworks would open in Peel Godred. In that same year, Bakerstown Station was completely renovated. The old station was completely demolished and was rebuilt with a massive canopy station with a whopping 7 platforms. This was done as there was also a junction with the other railways on the mainland. That had that room for the space, you know? And with this, we have finally covered part 1 of the history, spanning from 1921 to 1939. In part 2, we will be kicking off in 1939 as well, and we'll be going a decent ways up, basically during the entire British Railways era. And then in part 3, we'll be covering the post-British Railways era. Thank you all very much for watching this episode of Railways of the Porterverse, and I shall see you all in the next one. Okay, this is part 2. Okay. Sorry about the extra wait for about a week. I was busy repainting my room. Here we go with part 2. Let's get it. In September of 1939, the Second World War will begin. A lot of changes will happen during the war. Most notably how all of the engines on the island were painted into wartime black, and those engines on the Northwestern Railway were received the just simple NW lettering on their sides. Throughout 1940, bombing raids were carried out by Nazi Germany. These stations at Crosby, Upper Brenham, Kirkronan, and Tidnes were all severely damaged. Tidnes was one of the most damaged along with a bunch of damaged stations, and those had to go an extensive rebuild. The rebuilding of Tidnes Station would see it turn from how it looks in the model series into what it looks like in the later CGI series. This is the current condition of Tidnes Station in the Porterverse today. And in 1946, the engines that survived the war will all be repainted back into their NWR colors. The return to Northwestern colors will not last long, however, as just a few years later, in 1948, nationalization would take effect. The Northwestern Railway would become part of the Northwestern region of British Railways. Over the course of the 1950s, various changes, such as withdrawals and reassignments, would occur. Most notably how Toby was relocated from running the Arsdale tramway. Instead, he was now one of the runners of the Farquhar branch line alongside Thomas Percy. There were also 2 other trams that ran the branch alongside Toby, but they were located elsewhere as well, as British Railways would bring in the L1 known as Sigrid to run the branch line on their own. 1953 saw Henry be rebuilt into a 5MT. This is technically Henry Mark III, if you will, in the Porterverse, and this is Henry's current edition today. Also in 1953, the Queen of England herself, Queen Elizabeth II, would visit, and Gordon would pull the royal train. The next year, 1954, saw Sir Tom I retire, and his son, Sir Charles Tom II, replacing him and inheriting the baronetcy. In 1955, Duck would arrive after Percy was relocated to Thomas's branch line to help build the Timoth Harbor. Duck was now the NAFRA pilot. After a few years long construction effort, Timoth Harbor would reopen in 1957, and it now exports like goods. 1958 saw Diesel arrive, and thus the whole Duck and the Diesel engine events from the book would occur. In the end, Diesel would be sent away from the island. It was later found out that Diesel was eventually scrapped by 1963, and according to many accounts of Diesel on the mainland, he will not be missed. 1964 saw Boko arrive on Sodor, and shortly after, Bill and Bed were driven nuts upon his first days, and Edward had to ultimately save him. Kind of funny. The next year, Edward ended up damaging himself in a storm while pulling a train. He was able to get the train home one time, but the damage would ultimately see himself out of service for the next 3 months, and thus Boko would become the primary runner until he returned. Shortly after Edward's return, the events of Wrong Road would occur. Between 1965 and 66, not much really happened, so we'll just fast forward to 1967. In this year, it was announced that the branch line on the west coast of Sodor that originally went up to Cannes would extend all the way up to Harwich. These plans were wanting to be carried out, but British Railways was just holding back and trying to get it from not opening. This will ultimately begin to create tension amongst the Northwestern region and British Railways in general. Later on in the year, Douglas would help Oliver escape to Sodor. This whole incident would lead to Oliver revealing that British Railways was secretly planning to ban steam traction altogether on all of their rails. This would create a bit of a panic amongst the engines on the island and steam engines across the country. The tensions will eventually come to a head here, and the Northwestern Railway ultimately sue the heads of British Railways to get this whole deal sorted out. The legal battle that ensued was absolutely massive and very dramatic, but the aftermath was ultimately this. The Northwestern region will ultimately win the case and gain their independence, and that some engines from British Railways will be handed over and part of the deal, and that any British Railways engines that were already on the island post-1948 will remain there under Northwestern ownership, among other very technical details. But now, the Northwestern region of British Railways was once again reborn into the Northwestern Railway. And with a major victory in his career, Sir Tom Hatt II will retire with honor, and pass it on to his son, Sir Stephen Topham Hatt III. And with this change in leadership, a new era will begin for the island. And of course, this new era will be covered more in detail in part 3. That should be out next week if all things go according to plan. But you never know if anything comes up, but expect it next week, should nothing go wrong. Thank you all very much for watching, and I shall see you all in the next one. Okay, here we go. It's part 3 time. Let's get it. Time to finish Shoji. Here we go. With the rebirth of the Northwestern Railway in 1968, many new projects were undertaken. All of the railway's engines were repainted out of British Railways colors if they requested, and the new engines that were arriving between 68 and 69 were given the new assignments. The new engines in question included Arthur, Murdoch, Paxton, Sydney, Den, Dart, Barry, Airy, Burt, and a lot of others. And they would also follow the repaints if they requested them as well. In 1971, the Northwestern Railway and the Scarlet Lily Railway came to a joint agreement deal to build Boulder Quarry, which would be serviced by both railways. The construction effort went fairly well until the boulder perched at the site was dislodged and wreaked absolute havoc on the site. The damage was considered too much, and the project was ultimately abandoned. Plans would immediately shift to building a wharf at Valesbridge, which opened in 1974. The shunters at Valesbridge Wharf will be 2 of Toby's surviving siblings, after they were reassigned. In the same year of 1974, the events of the episode Lady Hatt's Birthday Party will take place, with Sir Stephen Topham Hatt III making the crazy journey to get to his wife's birthday party in time. What a Chad. In 1976, Ryan was built to assist Arthur in running the Harwich branch line. The Great Northern Railway N2 is used as a design guide, but there are some modifications made. Notably, the materials used to build him. This would help to reduce weight as it was along the coastal line. During Ryan's trials, he would end up falling off the pier. Basically, the episode Summoning Fish from Scene 7, but with Ryan instead of Thomas. It was a shallow pier that Ryan fell off, thankfully, and he was eventually fished out. And he still runs a branch road out there today. 1977 saw the events of Something in the Air occur, where Henry would derail on the coastal bypass. In 1978, Gordon's brakes would fail while approaching Kirkwood Station. He would end up busting through the station wall, damaging himself and the wall. The damaged wall in the station will be rebuilt into a wall with large window panes that will allow for viewing from the town below. And Gordon will be out of action for the next 2 months. Now Gordon is happy to have a panoramic view from Kirkwood Station. In 1979, James was being a bit more arrogant than usual, and so a very elaborate plan was formed. This plan, or just basically a prank, saw James being repainted into a Busy Bee livery in his sleep. And to everyone's complete, utter surprise, he actually found it pretty funny when he woke up. He would actually keep the livery until 1984. Speaking of 1984, this was the year the Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends TV series premiered. A big watch party was held at Knapford Sheds, complete with a giant projector screen connected to a TV setup. Between 1985 and 1995, the events of the books Toby Trucks in Trouble, More About Thomas the Tank Engine, Thomas and the Great Railway Show, Thomas Comes Home, and Thomas and the Twins would all occur between this decade. Pretty much any event from those stories just happened pretty much in order. In 1999, Thomas would go on his very first USA tour. He would be fitted with a front headlight, cowcatcher, and bell for the tour. The tour was a big success, and these tours occur every 3 to 5 years now to this day. And on some of these tours, you would find Thomas discovering some of the abandoned dummy units, like the ones that we call goobers. In 2009, Sir Stephen Topham Hatt III will retire, and his daughter, Madam Rachel Topham Hatt, will become the new controller of the Northwestern Railway. In 2010, Pip and Emma will be purchased from British Railways. They will be repainted and will succeed Gordon in pulling the Express, and Gordon would accept his retirement from the Express with honor. In present day, he mostly pulls mainline local trains. In 2011, a bust of Reverend Wilbur Ardrey will be revealed in Knapford Station in honor of his 100th birthday. The memory of the man who made the Sundry engines famous will forever be immortalized in the capital of the island. In 2013, the first ever annual Sodor Pride Parade would take place. An engine will be decorated for this event, and these have occurred every year since. In 2015, the Railway Series would celebrate 70 years of publication. In 2020, the Railway Series will celebrate 75 years of publication. And in 2023, the Northwestern Railway will celebrate 100 years of service. To this day, the Northwestern Railway thrives on the island, and the engines are all still around, making everyone's days better than ever. And with that, we have finally completely covered the full history of the Northwestern Railway in the Porterverse. The trilogy is now complete. I am so happy with the final product. Very happy to finally have this done. While I am here, I suppose I might as well give some updates for December. The remaining uploads for the Zero One consist of Porterverse Workbench and a few other types of videos. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that I have completely repainted my bedroom. The orange color seen in the Porterverse Workbench videos is now gone. There is a new Viridian color for the walls now. Suppose it suits the room better, you know? So the next model videos will feature the room in this new color. I do actually have a Christmas special planned. Nothing too crazy, but it will be up around Christmas Eve, and I'll have a lot of charm, I would hope. And the week after that video goes up will be the year review video. I also would like to make some more experimental videos, similar in the same vein of the magazine character video. At least one of those types of videos will come out in December. Most likely it will be a ranking video of every Thomas season, but who knows. There will also be one more marathon video going out this year, probably around December 17th, I think. And after that marathon will come the Christmas and New Year videos respectively. And that will end 2023. And then we will jump into 2024. What will the new year bring us? Who knows? We'll just have to find out, won't we? Thank you all very much for watching this Rails of the Porterverse 3-parter. And I shall see you all in the next one.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.